Welcome to our INSEAD Tech Talk today. My name is Ville Satopää. I'm a associate professor in the Technology and Operations Management Department at INSEAD, and I'll be hosting this session today. Now, today's webinar is part of the Tech Talk X series by Digital at INSEAD. This platform is dedicated to exploring new digital technologies, their applications, as well as their impact on management, business, and society. If you want more information, please visit the Digital at INSEAD website. Before we jump in, let me just say a few words about myself. For those of you who have not met me, like I said, my name is Ville Satopää. I'm the Technology and Operations Management Department, originally from Finland. That's where the name and the accent come from. I've been at INSEAD for 10 years now. So actually, this September will be my 10-year anniversary. Incredible to say that time really flies. Now, before I came to INSEAD, I spent another decade or so in the US where I studied topics that really form the foundations of AI today. So this would include mathematics, computer science, statistics, and that really sets the pace of the kind of topics I research and also teach at INSEAD. Now, as a couple of examples here, one of the earlier courses we did, in particular in the executive space, was this course called AI for Business that still runs today, 3 times a year. We started this in 2018, which actually turns out makes it one of the oldest executive courses on AI in the world. We also have an online version of this. It's called Transforming Your Business with AI. This is something that we refresh every now and then as things move extremely fast in this very exciting field of AI. Now, in terms of when we're talking about AI, there's one movie, and in particular its title, that always brings me back to thinking how things actually work, right? It's this a great movie that is really about modern computing. It's a story about Alan Turing, who is the grandfather of modern computing. Now, what I like about it is the title, The Imitation Game, because that's exactly how AI works. AI takes a large collection of examples that show how we should behave in a given context. So there's an input and what we want the ideal output to look like. And if we give AI thousands, millions of these kind of examples, it will find a sort of systematic mapping from one to the other that it will then use to behave in the future as it explores and uncovers different kinds of inputs and contexts, right? So it learns by example to imitate behavior that we deem to be appropriate. Now, why do I bring this up? Because this says that everything starts with the data, right? All its behavior, good and bad, starts exactly at the foundation formed by the data set. Now, we often hear this kind of a mantra, garbage in, garbage out, bias in, bias out, and this is exactly what is happening, right? The harsh truth is that if you have garbage data, no level of data science is going to save you, right? There is no magical data scientist out there that can turn complete garbage data into some kind of good business results, right? Or to put more slightly differently, if your data is wrong, inconsistent, unclear, biased, AI will do an extremely good job in reproducing that entire mess for you, right? Let me give you a couple of examples here. Here's one that I like to show. Focus first here on the right. What's happening is that you have a couple of these state-of-the-art AI tools. You give them an image and it will use words to describe what it's seeing. Now, if you look at them, they make quite a lot of sense here. What do we have? We have sink, faucet, water, liquid, wash closet, etc. These make sense for the picture we're seeing here. Now, what's the problem? The problem is that a lot of these kind of AI tools are predominantly trained based on data coming from the developed parts of the world, right? And that really forms the entire worldview of that AI, right? It doesn't understand that anything outside of that exists. It doesn't even understand that anything could exist outside of what is in its data set. So what would happen if we gave it a picture of something equivalent, but from the poorer parts of the world, right? It knows that, well, that has to exist in the world it's known because that's the only world it knows. So it will try to squeeze it into something it's seen before, right? Put yourself in the shoes for the AI for a second. What would you think this is? Probably start thinking that, well, it looks maybe like an old ready meal somebody left on the table a little too long, right? That's exactly what it all thinks. They all think it's food, right? Now you see where this is coming from. It all starts because the data set that we used to train the AI was incomplete, and so was the worldview of the AI. Now, here's another example. Amazon supposedly some years ago trained an AI tool to scan through its job applicants. And what they found quite quickly is that it was discriminating against women. Right? Now, does the AI algorithm in itself have something against women? No, it's just picked up this kind of a systematic pattern from the data, right? This field has been historically very biased against women, right? It's a systematic pattern in the historical data coming out of the field. The AI just picked it up, right? And it's reflecting the human bias that has persisted in this field for a very long time, right? Now, what about generative AI? That's the biggest and most recent hype around the AI movement. Does AI data quality matter here? Absolutely. First of all, we have all these tech companies such as OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta, etc., that are training now these massive large language models based on basically vast internet scale level data, right? So they need to worry about this, right? What's the quality of that data set, right? Because that quality will ultimately determine how good is the content that is being produced by these large language models, right? That's in the initial training phase where they train what we call a foundation model. This is a generalist, right? Can converse in different topics. It knows pretty much all the things that you can talk about in the internet. What we do at the company level often is that we don't use them as such. Instead, we fine tune them or we customize in various different ways. One way to do this is known as retrieval augmented generation or RAG. Through this, you give your LLM access to a local database so that it has sort of up-to-date information about your company, your clients, your products, etc. You name it, right? Now it's retrieving information from that database. If that database is not good, it's retrieving bad information that then leads to bad recommendations. Same thing with fine tuning. We continue the training, the internal mechanics of the foundation model with our local data set. If our data set is bad, that tuning is not going to take it into the right direction. Or lastly, we talk a lot about agents these days. One way to think about agents is that it's an LLM that has access to a lot of tools, right? It can write code, it can scrape the internet, it can access database, etc., right? Again, all this, there's a lot of parts here where data quality matters, right? For an effective use of an agent. So we really do need to think about the data quality at this level as well. Okay, so hopefully that's enough to motivate that. Look, if you want to pull off a successful AI transformation, you need to worry about data quality. What's the status quo? Is this something that we should worry about, or do most companies just have this completely under control? I was we had a large alumni event in Oslo last weekend. About 700 or so alumni came together to hear various keynotes and panels on business related topics. I gave a keynote, and during that keynote, I decided to poll the room. I asked them the following question. If you had to bet your entire bonus on the accuracy and completeness of the data feeding your organization's most important decision, what would you do? And the choices here varied from I would refuse to bet to risky to I would bet confidently, our data is solid, or actually, I don't even know, right? I had 186 responses coming out of the room. And here's what the results look like. Okay. 41, the majority, the sort of a modal answer was I would refuse the bet. Okay, too risky. The next one is I don't actually even know. I don't even know how good our data is. And the next one that we have, it basically keeps going down to betting reluctantly to only 4 people who said that no, I would do it. Our data is solid. Now, this was one instance. I have done this poll many, many, many times, and I can assure you that what I got here is very representative of what truly is the status quo out there, right? And this is the reason why we wanted to put together this panel, right? This is an important topic. We want to leverage the huge potential and power that comes with AI, but we need to have the right feel for it, right? So what can we do about this? How can we change this status quo where we are stuck right now? That's going to be the topic of today's panel. And I'm so excited to have heavy hitters from the field coming here today to tell you about what you can do, where to start. Now, first of all, we have Tom Kunz, who spent the bulk of his career at Shell, where he served as data manager for the downstream division. He was here tackling data quality at general industrial scale, building governance structures, and making the business case for treating data as a managed asset. Now, after retiring, Tom actually took a very interesting turn. He's now a missionary, currently based in Johannesburg, as we just found out before the webinar kicked off. Now, as he will tell you, data quality concepts that he honed at Shell turn out to be just as relevant in that new context that he is in. Tom, welcome. Next up, we have Kinda El Maarry, who holds a PhD from the Technical University of Braunschweig and is currently head of data at GotPhoto. Before that, she led a data quality and governance at HelloFresh, driving a significant organizational transformation, including redesigning the governance framework and building data ownership from the ground up. Now, she's also a regular speaker at international conferences. She recently co-authored a piece in MIT Sloan Management Review on moving from reactive data cleanup to proactive data quality prevention. Kinda, so great to have you here as part of our panel. And lastly, we have Tom Redman, known by many as the Data Doc. He's the president of Data Quality Solutions and arguably the world's most prominent advocate for treating data quality as a strategic business priority. Now, he founded the AT&T's Data Quality Lab. He has advised companies from startups to Fortune 100 multinationals. He's written several landmark books in the field. Most recent one is called People and Data, which argues that data quality is ultimately as much a human problem as a technical one. Tom, welcome. Now, on that note, let's kick off. And I was thinking I'm going to start here with you, Tom Kunz. Since we have two Toms here, I'm going to keep calling you for the full name. Now, while you were at Shell, was there some kind of a turning point, a moment when data quality stopped being sort of an abstract issue and it became something that people just absolutely had to act on?
Thank you, Ville, and welcome to all of you who have joined this webcast. Data is such an amazing topic, and there is so much money in this topic that can be mined out and put to the bottom line. For Shell, I actually learned today that it started in 1991 when a group of 4 people were trying to do an inventory of subsurface data. I mean, this is all the seismic mapping that tells people where there's hydrocarbons. But I would say the big change happened 18 years later in 2009 when the downstream organization, that's our oil products and chemical products, decided to implement a global SAP system. And there were a few who believed that it would be an ideal time to create a data organization at the same time to deal with it. Now, most data organizations are in IT. This was actually driven by finance, interestingly enough, very different. And it was an offshore model where we consolidated people and put it into an offshore mode. That was probably the biggest event that caused things to start moving. But I will say Shell's a big company, and there were people all over the company doing small data projects and finding solutions to significant problems.
Very interesting. Kinda, what are your reactions to that? Want to hear what do you think it typically takes for teams to really start taking this kind of data quality seriously? Is it really just, I don't know, a failed report, some kind of a bad decision somewhere, customer impact? I don't know. What in your experience really, what is it? You're muted, so.
Thank you, Ville. And hello as well from my side to everyone who's joining. In my experience, Ville, what I've seen is the pain has to be very strong, right? So no one wakes up saying, we need to care about data quality for the sake of caring about data quality, but it has to come at the point where it's no longer just an inconvenience, but it is at a point where it's blocking the day-to-day business, right? So like you're saying, it's not only one single failed report, but perhaps it's a very critical report that the C-level are looking into. And the point in time where this, I would say, kips is at the point in time where you lose the trust, right? The statistics that you showed, there were only 4 people out of the 189 people saying, I can confidently rely on the data. That tells the whole sad story, right? And that is the turning point, that when teams cannot do their work and the people that are relying on their analytical products, whether it's the reports or the dashboards, when they lose the trust of those customers that they have, the internal customers, that's the point in time where you see teams getting fed up with the status quo and start to do something about it. And they might drop it on a central cleanup team, which we'll talk probably throughout the call how that does not really work, or they might take things into their own hands. Now, this typically alleviates some of the pain, but also that is not sustainable.
And Tom, let me bring this now back to you. So Tom Redman, you have a very sort of a panoramic view of various different companies, how they have gone through this. What are your reactions to this? Like, what is the tipping point in your opinion?
I mean, it's a really important question. The first thing I want to note is that organizations and people inside them are dealing with data quality every day, right? A typical person in the line, I like to focus on salespeople a lot. They have a different skill set than I do, but as I get to know salespeople, well, it's like they spend an incredible amount of their day cleaning up leads that are coming in from marketing, right? And so a typical salesperson day, let's say they work 10 hours, well, 3 hours of it is preparing the data they should have. So it is not correct to say that organizations are ignoring data quality. They are eaten up with people dealing with data quality every day just so they can do their job. The critical tipping point is when they say, hey, this doesn't work, or it's too expensive, or we're not doing this well, and that they say, nah, we're going to have to attack the problem more aggressively. We're going to have to quit making errors in one department and cleaning them up in the other. And I think it's important that companies don't awaken all at once. Individuals awaken, right? One individual comes on, and then he or she gets somebody else on, and the typical person who comes on, as Kinda said, nobody does data quality for data quality's sake. They do data quality because we can't find the well. We don't know what's going through this pipe. We don't trust these reports on our market share. We're sick of regulators asking us questions about our report, right? And usually it's one individual, but maybe a few that say, nah, we're sick and tired of this, all right? I reviewed, some of my clients in prep for this, a couple of exceptions. Some people weren't motivated by a problem. Some were motivated by showing competitive advantage, right? I compete with others in this space. I want to be able to show how I am definitively better. And then one important example that is in Gulf Bank in Kuwait, where the new chief data officer decided to attack data quality, and the first thing she did was she commissioned about 100 measurements of quality, and then picked the biggest problem in those measurements. It's a 40 or 50 improvement projects get started right away. But the point is I'm building on what Kinda and Tom said. It starts with a problem or an opportunity. It is usually one person, and that person gets the ball rolling. Sometimes they encounter resistance, sometime not. But to those who are listening and go, well, how do I start? Right? find a problem and a person with an open mind willing to solve it.
Yeah. Often when I talk about data, sort of AI transformation within our programs, that's a huge hurdle. And data quality is a big piece in it. And one way you can imagine this is exactly along these lines of picking a single end-to-end process within your organization. That could be your problem, right? Now you start thinking, well, if I want to adopt AI within this process, what data do I need to fuel all that? And that's sort of a single, isolate sort of a piece that you can start, and then you go from there to another process, right? One process at a time. Now, we often also hear how these kind of the blame or the issues around data quality could be maybe even a little bit misplaced. Now, Kinda, let me ask you a little bit about this. Often I hear that we blame or we talk about data quality in the context of a data team or an IT. Do you think that's enough or not? What do you think of that? We often, that's what I hear often. It's like, well, IT is a mess, so our data is a mess.
Tell me about it. I think everyone on the panel has heard that. Might have been part of an organizational structure built as such, where the mandate of data quality problems has been handed over to the IT or the data team. And I think that is a gap in the understanding. People hear the word data and they think, okay, it's a technical problem. But in fact, if you take a look at it at a deeper level, it's a business process problem that is showing in the data. Now, when this happens and an organization decides to give that mandate for a central team that is now doing the central cleanup, what happens is this team can have the best engineers, the best analysts, but they will never have that business domain knowledge. So think about what Tom Redman was talking about with the example from the marketing team, where someone in the marketing team will have a very good understanding of what is a good marketing lead. What is a good qualifying lead? How does a segmentation logic looks like? What should be bottom of the funnel versus top of the funnel? Now, a data person doesn't know that. And so even if you set up that team, in which case you're not setting them up for success, completely the opposite. But even when you give that team that mandate and they start to try and put these quality controls in place, they will not be putting the right ones because they don't understand that knowledge. And so you end up in this bottleneck that you've created because they need to reiterate and understand the logic that they are missing, right? And so how I see it, and both Toms mentioned it, is it's not about more centralized control and cleanup, but it is about creating very clear accountability at the points of where the data is being created and where the data is being used. And that is where you need to focus on connecting those two dots, those two teams, those two persons, and get them talking. So the producers need to understand who's using my data, how are they being used, what are the repercussions when I drop a column or when I change the format or when I send the data later. And the same thing on the people using the data. They also have the responsibility of saying, this is how I'm using the data, and this is what I'm expecting, and this is what is at stake when I don't get the numbers in that format.
I think accountability here is ownership in practice is a big topic. And actually, let me bring this back to Tom Kunz, to you. When you were at Shell, where did the ownership really sit there in practice with the data, right?
Well, it had to sit in the business. I mean, if it didn't sit in the business, nothing happened. I mean, that's the bottom line. So we began really working a lot of processes like offer to cash or product lifecycle management. And across our downstream organization, I mean, we had over 1,000 people that had been offshored that were just doing data work and focused on this. But none of that mattered until we had a process owner in the business that said, I own data for the offer to cash process. And then we began working closely to solve problems with things like handoffs or systems that were connected, but they just seemed to forget the data needed to have a connection as well. So it's such a simple answer. The business has to own it. They own the P&L. They will be the ones that will see the benefit of doing something.
Yeah, and every now and then when I think about this sort of business tech interaction, there is a big part of data quality that is not even operational. It's very strategic because we can talk a lot about whether our data is even comprehensive or complete in capturing the phenomena that we're trying to model, say with AI, right? And I often, having worked as a data scientist in many projects, data scientists are very good at telling you which part of the data is useful for what they're modeling. But how about thinking about what is missing from our data set that I wish I had? Now, to do that, you need to have a strong business understanding to be able to think outside of the box, or the outside the data set, let me speak. Now, talking about AI, Tom Redman, let me circle back to you now. I know you had this very interesting HBR piece called "To Succeed with AI, You Got to Nail the Basics," right? Now, in this, you argue that companies often hope that AI will come to compensate for the weak data and the processes, right? When in fact, they tend to only expose them, right? Now, can you tell me a little bit about that? What do you think leaders are getting wrong about the relationship between data quality and AI?
Well, first of all, I think that it's hard for many leaders to really hold up the mirror and look at their data and admit they have a problem. You know, like on your graphic, you showed a lot of people who they don't know, kind of thing, right? And the part about that bothers me is not looking, not having the courage to look. It only takes a couple of hours to dig in and see the quality of your data and get a baseline. And instead, I think that it's just so easy to be in a state of denial. In a lot of senior leaders' defense, I also think that there's a lot you have to do. And it's pretty simple. I mean, Kinda mentioned creators and customers, and we found over and over. I mean, it's like at the base, that's fundamental. Connect them, and quality improves, right? Well, I mean, it's really easy to see, but hard to imagine. So, well, okay, we already like customers. We already do kind of, I mean, and hold up the mirror and say you don't, and then. Tom Kunz mentioned it's well, we're going to get this stuff out of IT and into the hands of the business, right? So, it is really easy. Okay, we're doing this model. This is the data scientist's responsibility, not the responsibility of the business that's going to use the model. Right. And I want to say one other thing, and this has really been on my mind for a long time. And it's the economist word for 2025 is slop. Right. I think, most people know this, but how did that get to be that way? How in 3 years do we go from these miracle LLMs to the word of the year is slop? Right. And it's like a cancer in organizations, or people know when they're sent slop. They don't like it when their colleagues do it. If there's something that senior leaders should be thinking about first and foremost is how do we prevent that stuff? Because it is so hard to get rid of, right? And the reason I'm saying it that way, that is formulated as a business problem, as a people, as damaging to the organization problem. It is the responsibility of senior management to build the right organization, to ensure that people aren't being hurt, and then to work backwards. It's okay, what do we have to provide, right, so that we produce less slop?
Mm. And we're really coming around now to thinking a little bit. I know the bits and pieces already been said here on how do we actually get started on this, right? We already talked about some of these components. We mentioned that really we need to bring in the business owners. We talked about starting with something concrete, a real problem, call it a process, right? We talked a little bit about producers and users, right? Now, let me come to you, Kinda, next. You've done these, you have a lot of experience on running these kind of transformations from ground up. What does this really look like in practice, right? And in particular, I'm thinking about the people piece here, right? You have all these data producers, data users. How do you align them, bring them together around one concrete problem? Any tips you can share here?
So what works the best, and it actually happens organically if you have those provocateurs, and this is a term that Tom coined in an article that we published in MIT Sloan, is you start where the problem is, and that's typically going to be where it is painful. So that is at the customer side, because they're feeling the pain. They're having to chase the missing fields, having to reconcile reports, and so on and so forth. And I'll give a concrete example from my time at HelloFresh. So we had this team, the global operation team, that was relying on the data coming in from all the local operation teams in all the different geographies. And they had to submit a weekly report to the C-level every Monday at a particular time. And that was very painful. Not because the teams are intentionally producing that slop, but because those local teams don't know what is at stake. And so this was a use case that came out of that team because they were feeling that pain on every single week, right? And so what we did there was joining the dots. And we didn't need any fancy tooling or techniques. It was simply bringing those two people together. And we set up what is now, I would refer to as a soft data contract. And soft data contract is just a Google Doc, a text edit, whatever. And the customers, in that case, the global operation teams, they said, okay, this is what we need. And this is the time that we need it at. And these are the formats. And if we don't get it at that time, this and this happens. And Ville, it was very enlightening to see that as soon as the producers or the creators understood what was at stake, that was it. And the quality rose, right? Because we looked at it before and after. Now, obviously, this is not the scalable way. You need to have some monitoring automation in place. But what is, and I'm pretty sure both Toms can agree to that based on their experience, and they can share that. Once there is that understanding, you start realizing it's not because it's intentional, it's because they don't know. So it's all about bringing them together. Start with one problem, bring those together. You don't need fancy tooling. Get an understanding and agreement, and then take it from there. And that's your first success story. And then you move forward from that, and it snowballs.
I wanted to refer now to Tom Kunz. What's your take on that and sort of mobilizing people and pushing them also to see that it's worth continuing this effort, right?
Yeah. So I love what Kinda said here. It is the bringing together the person that creates the data and the person that uses the data before you can ever really sort things out. So in Shell, we had a product lifecycle management process, and very closely related to customer. You can't sell a product to a customer if you don't know how to set the product up and extend it to different customers. What we found is that we did not know all of the rules associated with setting up a product. So there were something like 500 different rules. And a lot of them where we had problem was in taxes. Because, Shell's a big company. We're all over the world, and you've got to know all the rules associated with setting up taxes if you're going to sell a product. It would take us 23 days to set up a product or to extend it to a customer on average. 23 days. That means 67% of our product setup met the end-to-end time, and the other 33% didn't. That resulted in data quality of about 80%. So 20% of our transactions were failing because the data was bad. So we went in and we identified over 500 business rules. Then we figured out what drove those business rules, set up a way to enrich that data so we could put in 50 data elements, and it would populate the other 450. And all of a sudden, our data quality went to 99%. And we went from 23 days to set up a product down to between 2 and 3 days, whether it was a simple or a complex transaction. It was a huge impact. That was worth millions upon millions of dollars. In costs alone, we took out something like, I think we had 13 handoffs. We took it down to 5. We took 493 people that were touching this process, and we migrated it into 4 people, and we put them in the Philippines. And then, so people that touch something once a year, they have no idea what they did the last time. So all of a sudden now you've got people that are experts on these processes and on these data. And it all came back to getting the person that was wanting to set the data up or extend it to a customer, talking to the people that were actually going to use it. That's all it was. And then all of a sudden, the dollars just start going cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
Yeah, I love that sound. So, Tom, now that you're talking, right, I really want to come back to the way I introduced you, right? So after Shell, you moved, you're spending a lot of time in Africa as a missionary, and several times during our interactions, you mentioned that you do find all these concepts you learn about data quality still to be very relevant to you. I'm sure a lot of our people in the audience would love to hear, how do you connect these? How do you still find them relevant in the work you do today?
Well, first of all, our church has 80,000 missionaries around the world. So some of them are 18 months, some of them are 2 years, some of them may end up going home early. Imagine, just think about the flights for those people around the world in, I don't know, 200, 300 countries. And how many times do we get that wrong? That is a big one. Just being able to know where people are. We have a system that says when they go from point A to point B, we move the system with the people. It doesn't always happen that way. And so getting the people that need the data, that use the data, to even understand where it's coming from, it's a Herculean task in an organization that is mostly volunteers. But when we begin to connect those two ends of that spectrum, we've begun to see some improvement and that is real money that you're not spending on flights that are never used, or people don't know, they didn't get the itinerary when they should have gotten it, or they moved from point A to point B and the person in travel didn't actually tell them, or we don't have a visa for a certain country. And why don't we have a visa? Because we don't know the data that is required to get the visa. See, back to these business rules. Anyway, yeah, it's everywhere in my life.
Yeah, I guess when you're trying to manage any sort of a complex system at scale, data is going to be at the heart of that, right? And then you better hope that it's in good shape. Let's think a little bit more about this first initial steps of data governance, cleaning up the data, etc. Tom Redman, can I ask you, when you've seen so many companies, what are the sort of typical success factors that you see among the ones who have really managed to pull this off, right? How do they do it? Like, do they do it sort of a top-down manner? Is it bottom-up, somewhere in between? I don't know. What are the sort of common pieces that you have gathered?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important question, Bill. And I want to first of all go back to what both Kinda and Tom said. And look, the fundamental roles in all of data are data creator and data customer. All right. And so far, everything that's worked has revolved around getting those roles and relationships in place. All right. I want to take a quick sidebar and I'll come back to the rest of your question. But for me, the most satisfying part of my career has been how empowering people find those roles. People like working together across organizational lines. Nobody likes coming in and saying, oh, I'm going to make a mistake today because it's going to screw up a colleague in 3 months. As Kinda said, they just don't know, right? And so the secret is thinking through how in our culture, in this company, at this time, are we going to make as many of these relationships happen? How are we going to key into what is in the nature? Because nobody, again, says they want bad data. Well, what are we going to key in? The good parts of this company, that are going to get people to start doing this. Okay. And that's very different. I mean, Tom sketched a scenario in an old established company, so that, making some changes, right? Where it's fundamentally like the money really counted, right? And simplifying things really counted. Kinda talked about in HelloFresh, it's a startup and it's trying to scale, but people don't have the dashboards to run the company. So people in the startup want to be able to do this. I've advised organizations that, again, the goal is to cause their competitor to go crazy, because everybody's saying they're providing quality stuff, but we're providing the statistics. Okay. And so there's a lot of talk about changing culture and changing to a data culture. I think it's wrong-headed, right? I think good companies already have strong cultures. And the key question is how are we going to tap into the strength of this culture and build data quality into the strength of culture, and then get the flywheel moving. And so as you think through that, how then do we build the smallest possible bureaucracy, right? To help people find out about these roles, to help them connect, to give them the simple tools that Kinda talked about, right? To teach them how to make their first measurement, how to assemble a scorecard, right? How to recognize there's going to be a lot of turnover. So one of my favorite examples, I've mentioned Gulf Bank, but they added a module on data quality to their onboarding training, right? And so it's getting that management that supports this customer and this creator connecting at scale in the simplest possible way, right? And once you have that, don't think about buying tools or anything like that until you've done that. And once you've got that in place, you can use tools to speed things up. But right, if you don't get that management stuff right, don't bother. Right. Finally, I mean, by the way, this stuff, when you do it reasonably well, is fun, right? And there's not enough fun at work now. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I already see some questions coming up around tools. But before we get to the Q&A, let me ask all of you one more question, okay? And maybe we can keep this sort of rather brief so we have more time for the Q&A. If suppose you have an organization that wants to really start next week on this path, right? What do you think the first 30 days should look like? What advice would you give them? And why don't we start with Tom Kunz? Why don't we start with you?
I'd tell him to call Tom Redman.
All right. That's very good advice. Kinda, what about you?
If I can steal some of Tom Redman's customers by telling the secret he's been telling everyone, we've said it, right? Time and time again. Start with one problem. Identify who is creating that data, who's using that data. Establish what is the current quality level, so a baseline, and then connect those two together. And then measure again. And then you will come up with a vivid example like the one Tom Kunz shared with us with Shell, right? All of these numbers. And that is the point where you have that first success story and you can share it with management. And no one is going to be hearing Tom Kunz's story and say, I wouldn't bother in repeating that success story elsewhere, right? And you take it from there. And like Tom Redman said, that's the point in time then where you can start thinking about the tooling and where you can start thinking about scaling it. But have that first success story, have the numbers that Tom Kunz had.
Yeah, to make it tangible, right? And do that with a very focused kind of problem. Tom Redman, what about you?
So I mean, obviously, I like this idea. Give me a call, right? That's how I make my living. And
Yeah.
but I think Ken has got it nailed. The one thing I would add is I would look around for the people who are most eager to do it. Okay, so some people who maybe have a problem that is bothering them, maybe they're trying to think about, well, how am I going to get promoted, or something like that. And because I mean, again, you made the point, well, the company's interested, but that doesn't mean the individuals are.
Mhm.
And this stuff starts with a pairing of an individual and a problem.
I guess you really need to come back to thinking what's in it for them, right? And if you can argue for that in the light of data quality, they're more likely to hop on board, right? Fantastic. One thing I want to say here as well, when we talk about data quality, I sometimes I feel like we can slip into this mindset of thinking that there's good and bad data, right? But really, one should see it as a spectrum, right? Ultimately, what we aim for is to have a maximal sort of informational content, right? That's what really fuels the AI, right? And it's really a spectrum, right? I mean, I don't know what my panelists say, think about it, but I would like to think that you probably will never have perfect data in your company, right? But that could be sort of the northern star. So try to improve it and push yourself in the spectrum towards that, right? By filling in data, standardizing the language, etc., right? And a lot of the different techniques that we were talking about here. Now, for the rest of we got 12 minutes. I want to turn this over to the audience who have very good questions. Now, if you're listening, just know that you can write your question in the Q&A box, and you can also upvote questions that others have asked, right? So I already see here several different kind of questions. Let me start off with the one that has the most number of upvotes right now. Takes us back to thinking about tooling as well. The question is this: data quality is a business process question. That was something that was said by many of us. Now, are there AI tools that would help us to fix this?
So I have what I'm beginning to see. What most data quality tools aim to do is help spot errors. Okay, and maybe use a combination of business rules or business logic, and the data comes in. Stuff that falls out is then identified as errored, and off it goes to somebody to correct. Right. Now the reason these tools haven't been effective is it's pretty easy to find errors, right? But it's really, really hard to correct them. And so far what the AI assisted tools are helping do is helping identify more errors, right? What they've been unable to do is help at the corrections. Okay. I think that part of the chore and that no tool provider has really stepped up to, despite my moaning at them for a good long while, is take that stuff and associate it with what's going wrong, not with assigning somebody to fix the problem. And I've not yet seen the AI tool that does that.
Mm. I agree as well with what Tom mentioned. The correction part is very difficult. And I would add also another layer to it, which is the identification. So Ville was just talking about data quality being a spectrum, right? There's no right or wrong. It depends on what the business defines as correct or not correct, right? So if you manage to have an AI tool that can encode and extrapolate that business logic and business rules, which is what we've been talking about, right? Bringing those two teams together. We're bringing them together because we need to elicit all of these rules. We need to understand what does the null value here means? What does complete for you here mean, right? And these are always going to be different from one department to another, from one process to another, from one organization to another. If we reach a level where we can get that information and put it into an AI as part of the context, that would work. But like Tom said, there isn't any tool out there yet that is encoding that. Perhaps the closest are data contracts, which is just a translation of bringing those two parties together and then putting the requirements and the commitments, so the requirements from the customer side, the commitments from the creator side, and putting those in a contract that is being automated and enforced. That's the closest thing that we've had.
Can I just add to that I do think AI could probably help us understand business rules better. If you could see trends and understand, it can show you the problems, but it can always show you the things that are working. And this is a big problem where most companies do not understand all the business rules. The data quality standards, we would end up calling them, but you have to understand what rules govern the setup of the data.
And I guess also AI can help. I'm thinking about the sort of human AI hybrid here. I mean, AI could help the human to plug in the data faster, right?
But by the way, I mean, let's not lose sight of it. You got to get the management stuff right first.
Yeah.
Okay. And what I don't want people to come away with is, okay, well, AI can help, right? And then they're going to try to substitute that for the customers and the creators and the connection and the soft stuff, right? Said differently, in data quality, you can't solve a management problem with a tool. So far, anyway.
Well, a lot of times, I guess what we saw already as well with the status quo slide that I had is that a lot of companies don't even know what the status of their data is. And I don't think we covered this yet because there's a question about how to measure data quality, right? And I think this is important, right? And I believe, Tom Redman, you have one of your favorite exercises. I forgot the exact name, something like Friday afternoon data quality measurement. I think it taps exactly into this question. So how do you measure data quality?
Well, so look, I mean, Kinda made this point, and Tom made this point. I mean, the actual measurement, at some level, it's very customer specific, right? And exactly what the customer needs for exactly what they're trying to do. And it's a broad thing. It embraces, do we have the right data for this problem or this operation? Is the data correct enough? Can I read it and so forth? I mean, just quickly, a barcode, right, is got some simple data on it. You can't read it. It's presented in a way for a scanner to read. So there's a lot going on, but it's sort of like a health check, like akin to a blood pressure thing. I've been using for a long time something called the Friday afternoon measurement, and it got its name from a bunch of bankers who decided that they were going to make this measurement one Friday afternoon, then rather than heading out to the Hamptons for their summer vacation. And if you Google the Friday afternoon measurement, there's a little video of it comes up. But all it does is it just asks, take whatever you do transaction, lay out the last 100 times you did it, pick the 15 or 20 most important attributes, and then you have a little matrix of 15 by 100 and get people to understand the business in the room together. And on a Friday afternoon in banking, but it works any day. And give them a red pen and work line by line, and you just mark the obvious errors, right, kind of thing. And then and if a row doesn't have any obvious errors in it, count it as good. And if it has any errors in it, 1, 2, 3, whatever it is, count it as bad. And then just count the good. And that's your data quality score. And the good thing about this score, it's also how your business is performing, right? So, your business has to correct these errors so it can do its work. And so you get a score between, 0 and 100. And almost everyone thinks they're going to be in their high 90s, and then scores come in in the teens and 20s, and in the public domain, the average has been about 55 of companies that have done this, and so it is the blood pressure, right? Your blood pressure's too high, kind of thing, and but it can be a good eye opener. That 21% or whatever, right? You find out this literally can be done in a couple of hours.
I love how it's basically a statistical estimation problem, right? We need to understand the underlying sort of quality of the data, which could be the percentage of data points that are good enough, right? How do you go about this? You collect data first about the data, right? Which is sort of almost like metadata, and then you just count and you take the proportion of that, and that's how you can get at least some kind of an estimator of what that looks like. Let me move on to the next question. Sorry.
Just real quickly, the human eye, particularly people who work on it, are remarkably effective at spotting errors, right? First look at the data. Anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess we have very powerful visual cortex that's developed for these kind of pattern detection. Now, I think we have time for one more question. So that's why I'm pushing on. There's one that is about most overlooked technical depth in data quality. And in particular, what do you think separates organizations that actually trust their data from those that do not?
What separates organizations that trust it from those that
Trust their
don't?
data from those that do not.
Well, those that trust their data have done the stuff we've talked about today, and those that haven't have no reason to trust their data, and it's reflected that most people in your survey do not.
I think if you've got a business process owner over data, they will have confidence, they will own that, and they will make a difference. And it's separated because you have somebody that actually knows their data is good. They actually know it. Those 4 people in your survey, they knew their data was good because they had done the things that exactly what Tom said that we've been talking about here.
So basically, organization that has stopped looking at data quality as a central cleanup or as a technical problem, but have really shifted and done the organizational shift and placed the right accountability, the right ownership at those 2 single points of creation and usage.
So let me just finish off here. There's one more question which I think is so appropriate to finish off, because it is looking a little bit of data quality over time, right? And this question in particular is asking about data quality. It's been a topic for decades, right? What does the trend look like? Are we getting better? Are things getting worse? I know you've been in this space for so long now. What's your sort of cross-temporal view of the field?
I don't see any evidence that the data is getting worse. What I do see evidence is that it matters more, right? More people use data for more things, and AI puts this on steroids. So that's what I see.
Yeah. You certainly cannot bolt AI on top of bad data and hope that it's going to fix it, right? It's going to explode, right? And it's good to go back to basics as well in terms of thinking about what AI does. It basically just optimizes the objective that you give it, right? It does not have any empathy for you. If you have bad data or bad processes or anything, it will reveal and expose all those issues, right? Okay, I think we are out of time here. This was wonderful. Thank you so much again, Tom Kunz. Thank you so much, Kinda El Maarry and Tom Redman. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing all these insights. I learned a ton. I'm sure the audience learned a ton too. Thank you so much.